right, our next speaker is Timothy Pyatt, who is a 1981 graduate of Duke University. He is our university archivist, which I think is probably one of the most fascinating jobs you could have at the university. And this is a new addition at the special request of former students who said they wish they knew more about the tradition of Big Duke, as we call it, and also the law school. And also some people who have heard his presentation who described it as absolutely fascinating. And so we're really excited to share this with you today, and I'm really glad that Tim has joined us. So without further ado.
Thanks, Jill. I'm really pleased to be here today and give a chance to tell you a little bit more about Duke. Sort of true confession, like I'm also a Duke parent. My daughter is a senior here, so I'm married to a Duke alum, and my brother is a Duke alum. My dad was, so it sort of is in the blood there. So really, it's a great place, and it's one of those Duke is one of those kind of places that really sort of inspires you to sort of really stick with it. And so I was real happy in 2002 when I was asked to be university archivist and came back from had been working at that school with a lighter shade of blue down the road on that. So. Anyway, for those of you who aren't familiar with what a university archives is, we're the repository for all the official records of the university, and this is everything from 19th century Board of Trustee minutes to President Cohan's, the previous president's website. So it really ranges the gamut. And what you're going to see today is a lot of images from the university archives, and this is a resource that's available to you as you get into sort of looking for sort of the historical background of the school. If you research or whatever takes you into that, we're part of the main library on campus. And actually what you see behind is one of the images that you'd see if you came to the archives, which is the original 1930 rendering for West Campus. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back a little further than the building of this building of the law school and sort of take you back to a little bit to the origins of the university and sort of give you an idea of our roots. This is, you can see the faculty has grown a little bit since we were founded. This is actually the faculty from the 1890s and a school when we were first located in Randolph County, North Carolina. You may not realize it, but Duke actually started as Trinity College and was founded in 1838 by Methodists and Quakers who wanted to get an education for their children. And Randolph County, for those of you who are not familiar with North Carolina geography, is located about 45 miles sort of south and west of here. The school grew and changed names as it grew. It became affiliated with the Methodist Church and changed name in the 1850s to Trinity College. And we'll sort of go back to that, but it's important for you to see that we actually start off as a small liberal arts school in rural North Carolina before the move to metropolitan Durham and grow into great things. So. I want to talk a little bit about some of the student traditions here. I do this for the undergraduates every year, but I also think it's important for the grad students to know sort of the evolution of how we became the diverse and interesting place that Duke is. And one of the things is we were one of the really early schools in the South to have women students. I'd like to say it's from progressive thinking is why the school invited women to start attending as students, but actually it was for money. We were really hard up for students and we needed that tuition dollars. It was actually at the end of the Civil War when female students were first admitted. They actually took classes with the men, and then they decided that was a little too close, so then they took classes separately from the men. But it wasn't actually until 1878 that the Giles sisters, the three women pictured there, actually became the first graduates of the female graduates of the school that would become Duke. But actually, as early as 1864, women were attending the school. The other thing that people find surprising is that we were early admitter of international students. Again, partly from the ministry aspect of things. Actually, Native American students even predate they're the first minorities on campus, but Charlie Sung, who from China, was actually our first international student, and he attended school here to train as a missionary in 1881 and started a whole line of international students that grew over the years. A little longer was desegregation. Took quite a bit longer to come about at Duke. Actually, the Divinity School and pre-ministerial students on campus led the early desegregation efforts, which actually didn't happen until 1948 and 1949. The members of the religious fraternity on campus actually started a petition to the university administration asking for the Divinity School to desegregate. This was a long time in coming on this. Change actually didn't occur until March of 1961 when the Board of Trustees resolved that qualified applicants could be admitted to the degree programs in the graduate and professional schools at Duke. And so it wasn't until September 1961 that students were admitted without regard to race, creed, or national origin. In September 61, 6 African-American students were registered. 3 did withdraw, but of the others, 2 were enrolled in the law school, and the law school has the first graduate student to graduate in June of 1964. But sort of back to give me a little feel for the students. We're back to Randolph County. So I left you there when we were talking about the school's growth, as we're known as Trinity College, and we're in Randolph County. Well, lo and behold, we did move to Duke, as you realize today, and that's actually the move to Duke is why moved to Durham. The move to Durham is what actually introduced the Dukes to us as well. Washington Duke was a Confederate veteran who was very influential in bringing Trinity College to Durham. Several things happened after the American Civil War, one of which is the school, Trinity College in rural Randolph County, really suffered hard financial times, and they really saw that if the school was going to survive, even with that influx of female students, they were really going to need some extra support, and so they really thought that relocating the school from the agrarian country to a thriving metropolitan region like Durham was really essential for the growth of the school. So the campus leadership approached the largely Methodist minister board of trustees and asked them to talk to Washington Duke. Washington Duke was very prominent in the Methodist Church and also had founded the Washington Duke and Sons Tobacco Company and was really doing well in business here. So Duke said he would give $85,000 for building, and then he actually followed it up with a $300,000 endowment, which in 1891, when this occurred, was quite a princely sum. He also persuaded fellow Methodist layman and business competitor Julian Carr, who was also on the Trinity Board of Trustees, to donate 62 acres of land, and those 62 acres of land are what is today East Campus. So if you go across campus to East Campus, that was actually the original site of Trinity College in Durham. The move happens in 1892, and of course the rest is history. But the law school actually figures very prominently into that move as well, because that was one of the real advantages of moving from Randolph County to Durham, is that they really wanted to expand the legal education program and have a larger law school. And so one of the things was announcing the opening of the law school in 1891. Well, the move actually didn't happen till the following year because of some finances, but they really wanted financial problems, but they really wanted to enhance the program. But law actually had been taught at Trinity College even earlier than that. It actually starts in 1868, and courses of law had actually started as early as 1850. In 1891, this 2-year law degree program was started, but unfortunately only lasted for 3 years. In 1894, the law school was closed for financial reasons. But however, in 1904, the Duke family decides that this is very important, and they supply an endowment to really to put the school on solid footing. And at the same time, Samuel Fox Mordecai is also hired as the first dean of the law school. He was a Raleigh attorney and a law teacher at Wake Forest. And this really launches what would become the law school that you're a part of today. Talk a little bit about the Duke family. You've already heard about Washington Duke, the patriarch of the Duke family, who really was responsible for bringing Trinity College from Randolph County to Durham. But his two sons, Benjamin and James B. Duke, also had played a major role. Ben Duke was probably the biggest supporter of Trinity College during the era before it becomes Duke, but his younger brother also had more than a passing interest on that. You'll see statues to both of them on campus. Ben Duke is on East Campus, and James B. Duke's statue is in front of the chapel. And so Ben Duke was, particularly after his dad, was the big supporter of the school up until the major expansion. James B. Duke was sort of, he was on the fringes of things in the early on. He actually funded the library and did in 1902 and gave money towards books, but it wasn't really until 1924 when things really start to happen. In December of 1924, James B. Duke establishes the Duke Endowment, and the idea that Duke made his original fortune in expanding his father's business into the American Tobacco Company, and when antitrust laws made him diversify that in 1911, he moved into something called electric power, which everyone thought he was crazy to go into, but obviously very successful. Starts the Southern Power Company, grows into Duke Power, today Duke Energy. So he made his first fortune in tobacco and made even a bigger fortune in electric power. And so his idea in establishing the Duke Endowment is that he really wanted to return to the Carolinas some of the wealth that he was able to extract from them. That may be a little paraphrase there. I don't think he probably would have put it quite that way. But not only did he support Duke University, but also 3 other schools, Furman University, Davidson College, and Johnson C. Smith College in Charlotte also receive support from the Duke Endowment, as do hospitals and Methodist Church and other concerns. So in addition to establishing the Duke Endowment, which provides money to the campus on an annual basis, he also gave money for the rebuilding of the original Durham campus, which is now East Campus, and the construction of the brand new West Campus, which we're on today. So it's really was quite an amazing thing. And of course, if you were a Trinity student, this is actually the January 1925 first edition of the Trinity Chronicle as the students come back to campus. And lo and behold, they go away for Christmas break in December of 1924, and they're Trinity College, and they come back, they're Duke University, they become a university. So quite an amazing transformation for those students of the time. And as you'll see in some of the upcoming slides too, they had no idea of the building pain. The students last year thought the construction of the addition wing here, imagine having an entire campus being built around you while you're trying to take classes, which is what those early students did. Well, obviously, if you're going to have a construction project, you've got to have an architectural firm. And there's been a lot of interest in the design on East Campus. Most people may not realize, but the same architectural firm that did the redesign of East Campus and the nice brick Georgian style there is the same firm that also designed the West Campus, which is the Horace Trumbauer firm of Philadelphia. Trumbauer was a leading architect of the day, but not for higher education buildings. The only higher education building he built before Duke University was the Widener Library at Harvard. However, he had built 2 homes for James B. Duke, so we think that probably was fairly influential in why he was chosen as the architect for the firm, for the construction project. Another interesting feature about the firm is Julian Abele, who was the chief designer for the firm. Julian Abele was the first African-American graduate of the University of Pennsylvania School of Design, and he was really the lead architect behind many of the major projects, particularly the chapel. He did most of the drawings and designs for. After Trumbauer dies in 1938, he actually takes over the firm and actually is responsible for several major constructions, most notably Cameron Indoor Stadium, which obviously, if you get a chance to go to some basketball games, has a sort of iconic appeal on campus, as well as the Allen Building where the seat of the administration is. That was actually his last project before his death and the dissolution of the firm. So a major influence on campus. Julian Abele's role was actually sort of hidden for a number of years until his granddaughter attended Duke in the 1980s, and his role was really revealed and was better known. Because of Jim Crow laws, we have no evidence that he actually set foot on campus at the time. So it's kind of interesting. So he's doing all this sort of negotiation from a distance and sending his staff down for doing the design. So pretty major accomplishment. His portrait hangs in the Allen Building. If you have a chance to go over on main campus, you'll see that. As I mentioned before, the first phase in construction and expansion of campus was the rebuilding of East Campus. And if you get a chance to go to East Campus, it's a beautiful, very different look from West Campus, but again, very worth going over to take a look for, even if you don't have classes or reasons to go over. Just it's interesting architecturally. Several buildings were retained, but most of you'll be able to tell very quickly because of the ones that had the limestone and brick trim are the new buildings over that were added from 1925 to 1927. Classes were still in sessions, things are still going on. They have all this building going around these students as they're happening there. East Campus, though, the idea was after West Campus was built, this became the residential home for the Duke women and actually was known as the Duke Women's College. West Campus was the residential home for the Duke men, and so this actually was an arrangement from 1930 until 1972. Female and male students took classes together, but they actually had separate residential campuses and actually separate student government. In 1972, the 2 campuses were merged, and the Women's College was sort of integrated into the Trinity College as well as the College of Arts and Sciences was known. And both campuses went co-ed. Today, East Campus is actually the home for all the freshmen, all the first-year students, and that's been the case since 1995. So it's had an interesting evolution over time of the use of that original campus. The new campus was built by scratch, and one of the reasons you may wonder is why is West Campus a mile and a half from East Campus is that during the expansion of West Campus, this was obviously something that was not, it was hard to keep under wraps that Trinity was looking to expand. So real estate speculators bought up land all around East Campus, so it was very hard to expand it with the type of facility we wanted to build right next to the East Campus. And so with Duke and President Few and others, they looked at the land, they decided to buy some farmland that was close by, which is what West Campus sits and Duke Forest sits on today. And so they got a much, by lots of lands, could have a research forest as well as lots of room for expansion for doing this. And so West Campus was built over the majority of it from 1927 to 1930, and it was really this rolling terrain, really led for doing some very interesting architectural things, and we think that's one of the reasons why the Gothic architecture was chosen. Was really fit in with a heavily wooded setting. Also, there was this sense this was a very popular style. Yale, Princeton, Chicago, other schools that are wannabe peers at that time were also constructing buildings of that same style. So it was very much in vogue for campus architecture. It also sort of gives you that look of instant university, that feeling of age, and I think there was a lot that went into that as well. that went into that. And the other thing is, if you walk and tour on campus, one of the things that was done by design, if you stand on the steps of the chapel and look out towards the traffic circle, you'll notice you're on the highest point of the land there. And that was done on purpose to have the chapel be on the highest point as well. So there's lots of sort of interesting kind of design things. As you heard earlier, there was a plan to have a separate and larger building for the School of Law. And so that building was constructed, and you'll notice as you go on West Campus, right next to the Perkins Library, there is what's now the Languages Building. You'll see that there's lots of ornamentation on the various buildings that sort of indicate what it was used for. So if you look at the law school building, you'll notice that there's the scale of justice and a wig over the door into the old law school building. The law school moves into that in 1930, and at the same time is actually admitted to the Association of American Law Schools that same year. It had been a member before from 1905 to 1919. So again, really the school really takes off. And in fact, the law school was so successful that in 1938, the dean decided there was not enough housing for law students. And so he actually had 5 log cabins built on the north edge of the campus, roughly where Duke North, the newer addition of the hospital, sits now. For law students, so had these log cabins built. So if you think housing is tough now, at least you're not living in log cabins. So we've improved a few things. The other thing, obviously, Gothic architecture is kind of, particularly in the United States, is a kind of an imitative architecture. And so, and it was not, the designs you see on campus were not without a lot of thought. The year before expansion, the University Comptroller Frank Brown and the president, William Few, did a travel primarily of East Coast universities looking at different designs that they liked and things to recommend to the architect on that. And so this has brought several different kind of myths. How many of you have heard the myth about Duke and Princeton? They say that Duke first offered his money to Princeton so that, and so if he would rename the school, and then when he didn't, then we got the funds. Well, like most good sort of urban legends, there is sort of a root of truth in that James B. Duke lived in Somerville, New Jersey, which is right next to Princeton, and Princeton turns out to be one of the heavy models used in that tour. In fact, they spent several days there. They kept this wonderful scrapbook, and this is a page from scrapbook showing the Princeton visit. There's over 20 pages of pictures and notes from the Princeton campus that are in the scrapbook that Frank Brown and President Few kept. So there really is a lot of influence on that. And the Princeton stone was very much, James B. Duke was in love with that Princeton stone and really wanted that to be used. And actually started to negotiate with the Princeton quarry about bringing stone from New Jersey down to Durham for building it. So there is a connection with it, but just not the one that gets into the myth, which actually even made it to an episode on NPR of What Do You Know About That, which they had wrong on that. So they never printed my correction that I sent in, or never mentioned on air. But the reason why I have this slide up there is to sort of show the imitation. You see here, this is Duke Chapel, so this is actually the building that was built here. And this is the Bell Harry Tower at Cambridge in England, Canterbury in England, sorry, there. And then this is the Holder Tower at Princeton. And so a lot of people think that we copied the Princeton Tower, which I'm sure was the influence, but actually both draw back down to Canterbury in England, so you can see the same kind of tower there that's used. And actually, the University of Chicago has a very similar tower that just doesn't have the little peaks on the top. So again, this is sort of a nice sort of imitative kind of architecture that was used, but people are always very interested when they see Duke Chapel, who've been to Princeton before, says, wait a minute, I've seen that tower before. Well, if you've been to England, you've seen it too as well. Good design travels well, I guess. You heard a little bit about the stone earlier in the earlier presentation, and then I'd mentioned it as well. One of the great things that happened for us is that we actually discovered a quarry here in North Carolina, and actually only just a few miles away in Hillsborough, North Carolina, where the Duke stone was mined. So we did not have to bring all that stone down from New Jersey. We just brought it right down the road. In fact, it was so close they actually ran a rail spur right through the middle of campus that would deliver the stone directly to campus. And that stone, that quarry still has this viable volcanic stone, and we're still mining stone from it, and it's still used in many of the buildings today. The additions to Perkins Library sounds like some things for the law school here. So we're still actually taking stone from the quarry. Over 100 stone cutters were hired to chisel this volcanic bluestone from the Hillsborough quarry as well. And there were stone setters around as well. And so it really was quite a major production that was going on. And evidently people would come and just watch the construction as it was happening there in the 20s. Well, that gives you a little bit about campus, but I also feel like, if you want to learn a little bit about campus traditions, you got to learn a little bit about, why we're known as the Blue Devils and a few other things. So I'll sort of digress from the campus history a little bit and sort of talk a little bit about the traditions of Duke for a couple moments. Do any of you in the room, how many of you know why we're called the Blue Devils? Anybody heard this before? I see a few hands. So it's not for blue tobacco smoke, and it's not because, like, Wake Forest is the Demon Deacons, and because of our Methodist roots, we were, it's named after the devil. It actually is named for a World War I fighting troop. The Blue Devils, a French fighting troop that very much inspired the Trinity graduates. Actually, football had been banned at Trinity College, and after World War I, as the students came back, football was reinstated, and they decided they needed a nickname, and so they had a contest to decide what the nickname would be. And the school colors of blue and white had already been in existence for a while, but they really wanted to have a good nickname for the team. And at the time, Blue Devils was very much in the popular conscience. This French troop had been coming through the United States raising money for war bonds. Irving Berlin had written a song, Those Dashing Blue Devils. It was very much sort of a pop culture kind of thing, so it was a real name. It would need no explanations to students at the time. Unfortunately, though, there was a lot of hesitation because of the demonic connotation. There was actually, even then, there was some more like, well, can we really be the Blue Devils? Well, that's send the wrong signals. But so there was actually a stalemate, and the name was never selected. But the editors of the yearbook and the campus paper decided, what the heck, we're just going to start referring to the teams as a Blue Devil. And so in 1923, they started calling all the teams the Blue Devils, and the name stuck. And so we still have it today. And so you can actually see, this is a picture from 1933. You can see an early Blue Devil picture right here. It sort of looks more like clown suit, and then this is Wallace Wade Stadium in the background. And if you think that's sort of silly, I do. The Blue Devil has evolved over the years a little bit. So you can see the bobblehead, really, if you take a look at all the choices from the past, this is actually pretty darn good. This is actually the original Blue Devil right up here, the earliest picture we have. This fellow, Jelly Leftwich, was the early band leader on campus. And came up with the concept of dressing the Blue Devil up in blue and had this nice pitchfork. We used to have this tradition, and this is one of those things I've had several early alumni tell me this legend, and I've yet to get the full documentation, so I'll spread my own Duke myth with you today on this. But this is sort of the pitchfork there looks pretty sharp. Well, evidently, we had a tradition in the early football days where the Blue Devil would run out, and just like the Seminole does for Florida State, would throw the pitchfork in the air and let it spear down in the field, and then the team would run out, and the game would get started. So it was supposed to be this real inspiring thing. Well, unfortunately, in about the second or third year of that tradition, he happened to spear a member of the band, so that tradition sort of died. In the 30s, we go from this kind of outfit to sort of what I call the Blue Devil clown outfit, and then in the 60s, I don't know what we were thinking here. All right. And this is actually from my freshman year at Duke. I was not the Blue Devil, but this is my daughter, who is at Duke, actually noticed the Adidas there and says, oh, those are back again. So this is from 1974 Blue Devil, and then in 1985, we went to the modern-day Blue Devil. Well, the law school also has some of its own traditions, and you heard earlier about the Nixon portrait. Nixon is the only president to graduate from the Duke Law School. He was actually a member of the class of 1934, so he was able to use that new facility there on West Campus. And this is that notable portrait, which now I believe hangs in the Senate office building. It's on indefinite loan from the university to Washington. But one of the things you may not realize about Nixon is that you may or may not know is in 1981 there was great controversy on campus about Nixon, and it wasn't because of the Watergate. It was that President Sanford at the time had proposed that Duke be home to the Nixon Library, and this caused great consternation. The wounds from Watergate were still very fresh. And so they decided that the PR benefits of having the Nixon Library on campus would be outweighed by the negative connotations of his presidency and the scandal there. And so this is a political cartoon from the period, and we have a whole series of them in the archives. Unfortunately, we have a black and white, so this is actually he's supposed to be in red, white, and blue, and the Blue Devil's in blue there. But how the world sees Duke if we coalesce with Nixon, and sort of great moments in Duke history. The Duke Blue Devil meets his red, white, and blue counterpart. And there was actually a student group and a faculty group and others, and I love the acronym for the student group, Student Committee Against the Nixon Duke Library, or Scandal for short. So anyway. That's sort of all I have for you today, but I certainly hope you enjoy your time at Duke, and I hope that you do come over and visit me in the archive sometime. Thank you very much.
I was telling Tim, there's these great, when the portrait went missing for a while, there was one period where some students, I guess, hid it. Tom, do you know what year? I don't know when that was. it was hidden, and then at the time they didn't want to have it in the building, so then that was when it went on loan, and now it's just they like it in the Senate building, so it hasn't come back. But there was all these letters. Apparently, the news got out that it had been hidden someplace in the school, and there was a whole stack of letters from, I think, a 5th grade class that wrote in to the dean of the law school at the time saying, please find the painting. He did a couple bad things, but he still was a president. You should hang up his picture. And some said, his mother must really love him. Please. One said, I think that Watergate thing just got a little out of hand. So there's a hilarious group of letters that someone in our alumni office discovered, written with pleas to please rehang Nixon's picture. So there's an interesting history just for the painting. And a few years ago, a student decided that he wanted to investigate Nixon's legacy a little more, and his brother is still alive, and he lives, I think, in either Seattle or in either Oregon or in Washington, and he looked exactly like him, and so it was really kind of shocking to have him. It was very, very fascinating to meet him, and it was. He's a Duke alum, and I think Nixon actually lived in one of those log cabins. He described him living in those cabins, so really interesting history there as well. Spencer, do you want to, we want to give you a 5-minute break if you stay in the room. We're going to lead into our next exercise. Is Bruce, everything is very intricately timed today, so if you just stay in the room, we'll give you a 5-minute break just to talk to your neighbor, and then we'll lead off our next event.